Yo, what's happening, Sci fam? Emphasis on the fam. It's your boy Nickel. Yo, have you ever seen one of these? A fam tree, Sci fam? Well, maybe you have. Maybe you haven't. If you haven't, here you go. You just saw one. But most likely you have. And it kind of shows how different families are connected together. And so we call this a family tree because you could say that there's a bunch of branches that kind of show who is who and who married who and who had kids with who and whose kids are related to who and who is who. Oops, I don't want to stop my recording. I want to show you how to read a pedigree because that family tree is actually called a pedigree. So we use symbols so we don't have to draw everybody because we're not all perfect portrait artists. So I want to show you how to read a pedigree. Let's begin. All right, to begin here, let me choose a new color, and let's go with this green color. To begin with, let's just show you an example of a pedigree. So with a pedigree, we use these shapes. We use a circle to show female, biological female, and we use a square to represent a biological male. So when we draw a line between them, this line means that these two people have reproduced in order to have kids. And we draw that horizontal line so that we can then draw a line down to show the kids that they've reproduced. Some people could even use this horizontal line as a way to show a marriage as well. But we're going to say that those two people have reproduced to have some children. Now, we draw a line down to show different children that these people had. So let's say they had 3 kids. So let's say they started, their first kid was a female, their second was a male, and their third was a female. Now, it's important that in this instance that the firstborn is always on this left side. So that'd be the firstborn, the secondborn should be in the middle, and the thirdborn is here on the right. So it needs to be in order. All right, so female is circle, square is male, and then if somebody actually is deceased or dies, then we use a line through the shape to show that they have died. So perhaps in this case, there's a chance that maybe one of the kids actually passed away after they were born. And so let's say that the third female did not survive. And so we'd use a line through that. Now, if we think about this in a less grim way, all of our grandparents at some point, or great-great-great-grandparents, our great-great-great-grandparents are no longer with us. And so if you had a complex family tree, such as the one that I showed, those great-grandparents, after or when they do pass away, to show that they're no longer able to contribute their genetics, we put a line through them. All right, so let's discuss this. As I said, the children are shown in birth order. So the firstborn was on the far left, second in the middle, third on the far right. Also, Roman numerals are used to show generations. So like, for example, you use a Roman numeral 1, or 2, or 3, or 4, or 5, or 6, or 7, and so on to show the different generations. So in this instance here, we'd have generation 1, generation 2, and let's say that this person had kids, this firstborn female had kids with another male from another family, and they then had, let's say, 2 females, 2 girls. This would be the third generation here because it's coming down from the second generation, so this would be the third generation. Oops, I added an extra line there. The third generation. So those Roman numerals is how we indicate the different generations. The lines between shapes show relationships. So parents are drawn with a horizontal line between them, whereas children are drawn with a horizontal line above them. So let's look at a big old happy family where there's a girl and a boy and a boy and a boy and a boy, and she's so frustrated because she has all these brothers, and then all of a sudden her parents have a young daughter, but then she moves on to college, and so she's still sad, and then this one just wants a bunch of sisters instead of brothers, but hey, life is tough. We don't get what we want, do we? Anyway, moving on. We will shade, or these shapes become shaded to show the organism, because it's not just for people. It can also be shown to show different relationships within different animal populations. So it's shaded to show that the organism is affected by a trait. So let's say that the female has blue eyes, and we want to know which of these two people here has blue eyes. Well, we would shade in, if we're looking at blue eyes, we would shade in the person that has the trait. So this person has blue eyes, and this other person doesn't. So let's say they have hazel eyes, and so we would leave them as an unshaded shape, because they don't have the trait that we're trying to analyze and see how this trait moves throughout the family tree. Now, another situation that happens when there's children are twins, different types of twins. So a non-identical twins are shown where you might have, let's say there's non-identical twins we'll say that we have a boy and a girl that are twins, but they're non-identical. So to show that they're twins, we draw a line like this. So let's say that they have a mom and a dad, and these two have non-identical twins. It would look like that. Now, identical twins, if they're identical, then they're going to be the same. They're going to be the same sex. And so no matter what, when we have a mom and a dad and they have identical twins, it's always going to be either two boys, and since they're identical, we also draw a line between them, so it almost makes like a little triangle. Or they could have two girls. We draw that line between them. So with identical twins, they have this extra line right there. And with non-identical twins, it's left blank in between them. All right, so let's take a look at an example here. Let's say that we have a mom and a dad that have long legs and short legs. So maybe we're looking at paper monsters here. Well, if I were to draw a Punnett square, and I said that the mom's genotype is on top and the dad's genotype is on the side, if I then use this Punnett square to show the chances of the genotypes of their children, it looks like 100% of their children are going to be heterozygous. So let's show what happens here. They have children, and let's say that they have a girl, a boy, a boy, a boy, and they get a girl there at the end. All right, well, let's say that this girl then, well, first off, we should probably add the genotypes. So no matter what, all of the parents' children are going to have heterozygous genotypes. Now, if they're heterozygous, we know that the dominant allele is long legs. So all of these children are going to have long legs. Now, it adds a lot to add all this extra information, which is why we show, that's why we shade in different letters or different shapes to show that an organism has traits or not. I'll show you that here in just a second. So I'm going to choose a new color to kind of show this next generation here. Let's say that this last girl ends up having children with a guy, and this guy we're going to say has, let's say that this guy has short legs. So we have the mom with long legs, the dad with short legs. Let's do a Punnett square again to figure out the likelihood of the genotypes of their children. So let's say that the mom's genotype, which is heterozygous, there's a dominant and recessive allele. The dad's is homozygous recessive. So if we use this, we can see that 50% of their kids would have heterozygous genotype and 50% would have homozygous recessive. So let's say that they have a girl and a boy. And if I flip a coin, heads is going to be heterozygous. So we'll say that the girl is heterozygous and has long legs, and their son is homozygous recessive, and they have short legs. Now, let's do a couple things here. First, we have our first generation of parents. We have our second generation, their kids. And then their kids have kids, which would be the third generation. So I'm using Roman numerals. If I use let's use the highlighter to shade in everyone who has short legs. So since this first person, the mom does not have short legs, only the dad does, I would only shade in the dad's shape. all of their kids have long legs, so I'm not going to shade in any of their children. But their last daughter marries someone with short legs, and they have a kid, and their second son, has short legs. So in order to keep this simple, because you can imagine how complex it gets as you have a lot of family information, I can then erase all of this extra information, and I can end up with a nice, simple family tree. Now, all this extra information helped me figure it out, and it helped me create the story. But a lot of this information isn't necessarily known if you're like trying to recreate your family tree, or you're just able to look at an organism because we don't know what their alleles are. So we use these different Roman numerals and then the shading to show how different organisms have traits or don't have traits. So you can see how simple it gets once we use the different rules of a pedigree. So now you know how to read a pedigree, and you can probably make one of your own. See ya!